I watched my younger sister Sabrina sit in my father's leather chair, the one I once polished as a child, the one he said would be mine one day, and smile as she told me I was no longer a good fit for the company. I had given up my 20s and my marriage to keep that business alive, flying back and forth across the country to save Dad's clients while Sabrina was still in college backpacking through Europe. My parents called her their golden girl, the one who could do no wrong. And now she'd taken my place with their blessing. That was the moment something cracked. My name is Claire Whitmore, and I live in Colorado. They thought I'd just walk away. But I had a different plan. I stood frozen in that boardroom as my baby sister Sabrina, the golden girl of our family, slid the termination letter across the table like it was just another Tuesday. "You're no longer a good fit," she said, with a rehearsed smile and not a shred of guilt. My heart didn't break, it detonated. I had sacrificed my 20s to hold this company together, flying coast to coast to save accounts, pouring my life into my father's legacy, while Sabrina lived in Paris and came back with lipstick and degrees. And now, with Mom and Dad sitting silently beside her, she erased me. But what they didn't know was, I never gave up everything. My name is Claire Whitmore, and I live in Colorado. They took my title, but not my power. They say the company was always a family business, but in our family that meant Claire does the work, Sabrina gets the praise. When I was 22, fresh out of state college, I walked into my father's cluttered little office with a plan to bring our marketing agency online. He waved me off, told me to fetch coffee. But I stayed late every night for a year, quietly teaching myself digital strategy, rewriting proposals, and emailing potential clients from the back room, while my father took credit, and Sabrina posted filtered sunsets from Barcelona. By 25, I'd brought in half our top 10 accounts. But every holiday dinner, my parents gushed about Sabrina's travel blogs or the nonprofit she briefly interned at until it closed. Me, I was the reliable one. Not brilliant, not gifted, just reliable. I told myself it didn't matter. That work was its own reward. I remember the night I turned down a proposal from James, the man I loved. He wanted me to move with him to Seattle and start fresh. I said no, because Dad had just lost our second largest client and needed me to fix it. James told me, "Claire, they'll never love you the way you want them to." I laughed, but I cried for hours after he left. And I never told anyone why. Sabrina came back from Europe 2 years later, tan, loud, and penniless. She walked into the office with a designer scarf and a smile, and my mother acted like royalty had returned. I trained her myself against my instincts. I wanted us to be close. I wanted a sister. Instead, she took my client lists, charmed the board, and made herself a VP in under a year. I didn't complain. I thought this is what love does. You lift people you care about. But I was wrong. All I'd done was hand her the knife. It's strange looking back. I can trace every little compromise I made. The times I agreed to cancel my vacation so she could fly to New York for visibility. The times I redid her presentation decks at midnight. The times I smiled when our parents introduced her as the one with the vision. And when Dad got sick 2 years ago, it was me who ran every meeting, filed, every payroll, stayed up for nights charting projections. Sabrina dropped by the hospital once with flowers, then disappeared again to clear her head in Costa Rica. I held the line. I even paid Dad's private care nurse from my own savings. Still, the day he passed, it was Sabrina they quoted in the obituary. A visionary who inspired his daughters. My name wasn't even mentioned. I didn't speak up. I didn't cry. Because deep down I believed that loyalty mattered. That hard work was the currency of love. But in that boardroom, when she handed me my termination letter with those perfectly manicured hands, and my mother just looked away, something snapped. It wasn't rage. Not really. It was like something inside me went cold. I realized then I wasn't dismissed in that moment. I had been dismissed years ago. Every sacrifice I made had been invisible. Every moment I carried this family was written in disappearing ink. And that's when I understood I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to plead for scraps of love or recognition. No, if they saw me as nothing, they wouldn't even see the revenge coming. because while they played favorites and polished Sabrina's crown, I had quietly built something of my own. A whisper of memory floated through my mind, an older client named Harold Jenkins, whose children didn't want his business. A man who once told me, "You've got grit, Claire. That's rare. Someday, I hope someone puts you in charge." That day had come, and they were going to regret not seeing it. For a while, I disappeared, not in shame but in silence, in strategy. While Sabrina paraded around as the new CEO, giving interviews, updating the company website with her glossy headshots, and speaking in circles about modernizing legacy infrastructure, I was doing something far more dangerous. I was listening. I still had contacts, former clients who trusted me more than they ever had our name. Former employees who were pushed out under Sabrina's visionary realignment. Former board members who called me quietly, whispering, "Claire, what happened?" They didn't call to pity me. They called because things were unraveling. At first it was subtle. An email here, a missed deadline there. Then the complaints grew sharper. A multi-million-dollar pitch lost because Sabrina had promised what couldn't be delivered. A loyal client walked after 20 years citing communication issues. The whispers were multiplying. One night a former assistant of mine, Tina, loyal to the core, called me crying. She cut half the marketing team, Claire, said it was to streamline overhead, but now she's outsourcing to her college roommate's startup. It's a mess. Everyone's scared. I closed my eyes and smiled. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Because this was the beginning. I asked Tina to keep me informed and she agreed. "Anything for you," she said. "You were the only real leader we had." I had underestimated how many people still remembered. I started collecting, not dirt, just facts, budget reports, contract amendments, staff memos. Every careless move Sabrina made in the dark, I caught in the light. It was all above board, but barely. She was trying to reshape the company with buzzwords and bluster, but she had no backbone, no experience in crisis, no idea how to lead when charm failed. And fail it did. She started canceling meetings last minute, avoiding hard questions at quarterly reviews, blaming others, then crying in the bathroom when things didn't go her way. I know because people told me. People who once ignored me now saw me as the quiet constant they had lost. I never spoke against her publicly. I didn't need to. She was doing the damage herself. But here's what they didn't know, what no one knew. Years ago, Harold Jenkins, that old-school client, had signed over part of his company stock to me when we helped him transition his brand. He insisted. I hadn't wanted to accept it, but he looked me in the eye and said, "Don't be loyal to people who only love you when you serve them. Build your own." And I did. Quietly. That stock had matured. And through a shell trust managed by a friend in Denver, I had diversified it, strategically investing in competitors and suppliers, in small firms that had contracts with our agency. I never wanted to destroy the company my father built, but I wasn't going to let it rot under Sabrina's hand. I had the leverage, I had the legal threads, and I had the patience. While Sabrina played CEO in heels too high and vision too shallow, I prepared my return not with rage or ego, but with precision. And with every slip she made, the clock ticked louder. Because once the numbers broke beneath her, the board would look for someone to blame. And I would be waiting not to be their hero, but to take back what had always been mine. I used to think power came from being chosen from approval titles, hand-me-down opportunities. I waited half my life for someone to hand me what I had already earned. But power doesn't come from permission. It comes from what you've built when no one was watching. And I had built something they never saw coming. The day after Sabrina's disastrous quarterly presentation, where she stumbled through half-truths and vague answers, the board's faces stiff with disbelief, I met quietly with Nathan Carrington, a corporate attorney I'd trusted for years. We sat in his Denver office, the windows reflecting a sky as gray and sharp as my mood. He looked over the documents I brought, ownership records, contract clauses, trust allocations. When he looked up, there was a slow smile on his face. "You've had this in your back pocket all along." "No," I said, folding my hands. "I built it piece by piece, and I'm ready to use it." You see, I'd never sold those shares Harold Jenkins gave me. Instead, I rolled them into a holding company. Then I used dividends and capital from my consulting work to acquire more little pieces here and there. A few employees who left with equity offered me their shares quietly years ago after Sabrina began gutting their departments. I never bragged, never told anyone. But now altogether it made up nearly 22% of voting shares in our firm. Combined with the growing unrest among the board, 3 of whom had recently approached me off record about the company's direction, it meant one thing. I had the numbers. I could call for a special vote of no confidence. I could take the seat back. I could become CEO. And suddenly the very thing that had once been used to humiliate me, that I was no longer a good fit, became my greatest advantage. Because I didn't want the company the way it was now. I wanted it clean. I wanted it rebuilt. And I didn't want Sabrina to know what was coming until it was too late. Nathan leaned back in his chair. "You want to move now?"
Not yet, I said quietly. Let her feel safe. Let her think she's untouchable. I want the final blow to come from within the same boardroom where she smiled and dismissed me.
He gave a low whistle. "You're colder than I expected." "No," I said. "I'm done being warm to people who used my fire to light someone else's throne." Over the next few weeks, I worked in the shadows. I met with investors and partners she had alienated. I drafted proposals for how to restructure leadership. I reactivated my consulting license and let a few rumors circulate. Not denial, just possibility. And then something strange happened. People started calling me again, not just to gossip, but to ask what was next. Not for Sabrina, for me. They said they missed the steadiness, the clarity, the competence. It shook me. I had spent so long thinking I was forgettable, but maybe I had just been hidden until now. One afternoon, I visited my mother. She poured tea with her usual grace, but her eyes were uneasy. "Sabrina says you've been talking to board members." I took a slow sip. "Why do you ask?" "She's nervous," my mother admitted. "She said you might be trying to take her down." I tilted my head. "Did it ever occur to you that she took me down first?" My mother flinched but didn't respond. I stood. "I'm not here for war, Mother. I'm here for correction." She followed me to the door, her voice hesitant. "Claire, you always were so capable. I'm sorry we didn't say it more." The words came too late, but I didn't need them anymore. Because I finally understood that power is not about being crowned. It's about claiming your worth with both hands, especially when they tried to leave you empty. I got in my car, started the engine, and glanced at the passenger seat where my folder of legal motions sat. They'd built a kingdom of illusions. Now I was ready to walk through the front gate with the truth and set it all on fire. I didn't need to destroy her. Sabrina was doing that herself, one lie, one reckless shortcut, one missed detail at a time. All I had to do was let gravity take over. The first crack came quietly. A supplier contract that Sabrina had negotiated, one she boasted about in meetings, turned out to have hidden penalty clauses. She'd skimmed the fine print. It cost the company nearly $200,000 in early termination fees when she changed vendors without due process. The second junior account manager leaked an internal memo to the press. Something about toxic restructuring and nepotism in executive decision-making. The company name trended for all the wrong reasons, and while Sabrina scrambled for PR consultants, I sat across from 3 board members in a quiet hotel lounge with printouts, balance sheets, and my carefully documented timeline. They didn't need much convincing. They'd already been watching. "She's in over her head," one of them said, rubbing his temples. "Worse," I added. "She's sinking everyone with her." I left the meeting with signatures. Official support for a vote of no confidence scheduled discreetly under the guise of an urgent leadership discussion. It would be the same room, the same boardroom where she fired me. Poetic symmetry. But before that day came, something happened that almost rattled me. Sabrina called, not to apologize, not even to check in. She wanted advice. "Hey, Claire." Her voice was brittle. "Can you talk for a second?" I paused. "Talk. There's something off with the funding round. Investors are backing out, and the press won't return my calls. I know things have been weird between us, but maybe you could just take a quick look." And for a moment, just a flicker, I saw the scared little girl who used to follow me around with her braids undone and jelly on her hands, begging me to tie her shoes. But that moment passed. You have the title, I said coolly. Isn't this what you wanted? She was silent. I hung up. Because forgiveness is not the same as rescue, and sometimes the best way to teach someone what they destroyed is to let them live in the ruins. The day of the vote arrived. Sabrina walked into the boardroom like she always did, heels, sharp blazer, pristine mask, still intact. But she looked around and saw the faces weren't smiling. The air had changed. The meeting began. I was announced as a guest invited by majority vote to present my findings. She froze. I stood slowly, placed a leather binder on the table, and began to speak, not with anger, not with fire, but with facts. Metrics, losses, negligence, broken contracts. And then I closed with a quiet statement. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to clean up what was left behind. And I have the experience and the shares to do it. The vote passed. Overwhelmingly. Sabrina didn't speak. She couldn't. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. And when I finally met her eyes, I saw it not rage, not entitlement, but shame. She knew. She had reached the end of the ledge, and I had simply stopped trying to hold her hand. As I signed the documents accepting my new role, not CEO but interim chair of restructuring, I felt nothing. Not pride, not vengeance. Just a quiet peace. Because I had taken everything back, not through fury, but through truth. She waited until everyone had left. The boardroom was empty, just chairs pushed back in quiet disbelief, coffee cups half finished, and the echoes of the vote still hanging in the air like distant thunder. I was packing my folder when I heard the words, "Claire, please." I didn't look up right away. I didn't need to. I recognized the sound in her voice. It wasn't power. It wasn't confidence. It was desperation. I turned slowly. Sabrina stood there, her eyes wide and red-rimmed mouth trembling as she struggled to find the right lie to fix everything. But this time there was no audience, no applause, no parental backup to smooth the edges of her mess. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could prove to them I wasn't just the favorite." "You weren't proving anything," I said quietly. "You were playing dress-up with a crown you didn't earn." She flinched. Then came the words I knew were coming. "I didn't want to fire you. They pushed me. Mom and Dad said you'd forgive me." I stared at her. "All my life they protected you. Even when you failed. Even when you didn't show up. But when I needed protection, they gave you the throne and gave me the sword." She started crying. Real messy crying. Not the performative tears she used when investors got tough, or when Dad used to scold her. These were guilt tears. Crushed tears. The kind that show up when everything has finally broken and there's no more mask left to wear. "I'm sorry," she said, and maybe she meant it, but I had learned the hard way an apology without accountability is just damage control. So I didn't comfort her. I didn't touch her shoulder or say it's okay. Instead I said, "The damage you caused wasn't just to me. You nearly tanked everything Dad built. You left staff unemployed, mismanaged client funds, and put this company's name through scandal for your pride." She sank into a chair, hands shaking. "I can fix it. I'll help. I swear." "No," I said, folding my arms. "You won't." Her head snapped up. "I'm not giving you a second chance, Sabrina. You had 100. But she started panic rising. I cut her off gently but firmly. "This isn't revenge. It's release. I'm not taking this company back so I can gloat. I'm taking it back so I can bury what's broken and rebuild something that matters. Without you in charge." She looked like she wanted to scream but couldn't find the air, and I felt nothing but resolve. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I had already won. And when you've won the war, you don't argue with the ones who lit the match. You let them sit in the smoke and decide what they've become. I walked to the door. She called after me. "What do I tell them? What do I tell Mom and Dad?" I paused in the doorway. "Tell them the golden girl fell, and the one they ignored picked up the crown not because she wanted it, but because someone had to protect the kingdom." I left her in that room, not out of cruelty, but out of peace. Some lessons are best learned alone. 3 weeks later, the company was quiet again. No more press leaks. No more sudden staff cuts. No more panicked calls from investors. We had stabilized. I brought in a trusted team, restructured leadership, reopened closed accounts, and rehired 3 of the employees Sabrina had let go. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because it was the right thing to do. Because someone had to remind them what honor looked like. And then I started preparing my exit, not because I was defeated, because I was finally free. One afternoon, I walked into my parents' house. My mother met me at the door with swollen eyes and shaking hands. I didn't know she whispered. I didn't see what was happening between you and your sister. That's the thing, I said gently. You didn't want to see. My father sat in silence across the room. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. Like the truth had finally caught up to him after years of running from it. I'm proud of you, he said hoarsely. I should have told you that a long time ago. I nodded, but I didn't reach for it. Because I had made peace with the fact that some validation comes too late to matter. Sabrina joined us not long after. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't wear her usual armor of designer labels or fake confidence. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and finally admitted she started it. I know I hurt you, she said, barely meeting my eyes. I let my insecurities turn into cruelty. I was so busy proving I was more than the golden child. I became someone I can't even respect. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. I saw it in her eyes, the hollow space where arrogance had once lived. She reached for my hand. I'm sorry. I took a long breath, and I forgave her. Not with grand speeches, not with hugs, just with a quiet nod. Because forgiveness doesn't have to mean forgetting. It just means I release myself from carrying your weight. But I also told her and them what they weren't expecting. I'm stepping down. They all stared at me. What do you mean? My mother asked, voice cracking. I've appointed a new CEO, I said. Someone capable. Someone ethical. Someone who doesn't share our last name. But you just got the company back, Sabrina said, stunned. You fought so hard. I didn't fight for power, I replied. I fought for peace. And now I have it. The truth is, I never wanted to sit on the throne. I only wanted to stop bleeding for a family who never noticed the wound. And now that the bleeding had stopped, now that the knife had been removed, I didn't want to stay in the castle that let it happen. A month later, I packed my things. Not from the office, from my life here. I booked a one-way ticket to Vermont, where a quiet cabin waited for me near a lake I used to dream about when things got hard. I don't need applause. I don't need revenge anymore. I just need space, stillness, a life where my worth is not a battlefield. As I locked the door to my apartment, I received one final envelope. Inside was a letter handwritten. From Sabrina, Claire, I will never be able to repay what I took from you, but I hope one day I'll become the kind of woman who can stand next to you without shame. I'm going to try. Not to win, just to be better. I folded it carefully, tucked it into my bag, and left. Because I had already won, not by taking everything back, but by learning to let go on my terms. My name is Claire Whitmore. I used to be invisible. Now I choose who gets to see me. And that is the greatest power of all.